Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Complaints Commission. Thank you for coming to this press briefing. I am Beverly Sargent, the Senior Administrative Officer here at the Complaints Commission. Other staff members present are Monique Hodge-Bell and Kadisha Maduro. The next person that will address you will be the Complaints Commissioner, Mr. Elton Georges. He will speak to you on the 4th annual report and his 12th special report and other current projects. The 4th annual report presents statistics of the Commission's activities for the year 2012, and the Commissioner's comments on the general state of public service delivery as seen from his vantage point. The Complaints Commissioner is a constitutional post, the holder of which is appointed by the Governor, acting after consultation with the Premier and the Leader of the Opposition. The Commissioner is responsible for reporting on the investigation of complaints considered, including a summary of how they have been resolved, his findings and recommendations, appointing mediators where appropriate to help resolve disputes, promoting public awareness of the role of the office, and encouraging all public officers and public authorities to respond constructively and helpfully to complaints made directly to them as outlined by the Complaints Commissioner Act of 2003. At the end of the statement, Mr. Georges will take questions. Copies of the annual report can be found on our website at www.ombudsman.vg. We're also on Facebook and Twitter. Now I introduce you to Mr. Elton Georges, our Complaints Commissioner.
Let me thank Beverly Sargent for the introduction, and let me thank you all for coming, and welcome to this, our first press briefing in 2013. As I've said many times before, the press is a natural partner of an ombudsman office anywhere, and that includes here in the Virgin Islands. And they're a partner in getting the word out on what we do and how we do it. Through means of the press and the media, people get to know about the office and get a good idea of how we operate. Our annual report for 2012, as you know, was tabled in the House of Assembly finally last week, Monday. Along with it were two special reports to the House of Assembly, numbers 10 and 11. We titled the foreword to the annual report, "Good Service is No Accident," to emphasize the need for public agencies to devote deliberate attention to the demands of service improvement. Everyone agrees with good service, but in practice, not a lot of attention appears to be paid to it. I will not be going over the report here. I will just make a few general comments and take your questions, if any. First, let me say the good news. The Complaints Commission is still open for business. We are still in existence. Within 4 months and a bit, this office will be celebrating its 5th birthday. The second good news is that it's not only in existence, but it is carrying out its main assigned task of receiving and investigating complaints against government agencies according to law. The third thing I would say is that I believe that the office is having an overall beneficial impact. Certainly, some of the persons who have used the office to look into their grievances have been satisfied with the process even when they did not achieve all of their objectives. The annual report, as usual, carries snippets of sample comments from some of these persons. On the government side, I perceive that some more attention is being given to handling complaints more professionally. I mentioned in the report the internal complaints system, which has been introduced in government departments. That system is still in the teething stage, and we are anxious to see how it will perform. It is now too early to say anything much about it. On the wider canvas, it is on the whole difficult to assess the impact of this office, an ombudsman office anywhere. How would one measure the maladministration, for example, that has been prevented simply by the actions that the Complaints Commission has already taken, and especially when many departments are not very forthcoming about informing us of any actions that they may take as a result of our recommendations and our findings. In the end, it is for others, of course, to judge and to say what sort of impact this office is having. But as its existence comes to be better known and the principles for which we stand, I believe that the conversation in official circles is gradually changing. And gradual is okay. I admit here to being a bit impatient, that I do tend to get a bit too impatient, perhaps, with the very slow pace of change, and that I tend, therefore, to forget how relatively new this office is. I was bumped back to a sense of reality by comments made by the Bermuda Supreme Court last week on the role of the Complaints Commissioner there, the Ombudsman there, as the court upheld the certification of contempt brought by the Ombudsman against the mayor and the deputy mayor of the corporation of the city of Hamilton. In that case, if I may say briefly, the deputy mayor and the mayor did not attend when summoned by the Ombudsman, who was investigating a matter, and they use as their excuse that the Ombudsman did not permit them to have legal representation at the interview with them that she was summoning them to. The court threw out that defense and upheld the contempt certification sought by the Ombudsman. But in the course of his judgment, the judge said the following, quote, "The office of Ombudsman is still a relatively new one, and the number of persons in Bermuda, be they public officials or ordinary citizens, who have an instinctive appreciation for the principles underlying the review of administrative action, is probably comparatively small. Bermuda's formal constitutional adoption of democratic governance in 1968 was merely a legal and political step into modernity. The Ombudsman Act, designed to facilitate practical good governance in modern real-world terms, is still an infant, less than 10 years old. Against this background, the idea of an investigation into whether the process deployed by the corporation in granting a lease conformed to the best good governance standards in terms of, inter alia, requirements of transparency and public consultation might be viewed, understandably, as revolutionary in public policy terms." These are some of the comments of the Chief Justice in Bermuda in rendering his landmark decision, what will be a landmark decision for ombudsman's offices everywhere, in upholding the role of the ombudsman and the entitlement to respect when the ombudsman summons someone to be a witness. The Complaints Commissioner Act 2003 is, of course, just over 10 years old, but our office, as I've already said, is less than 5 years old compared to the office in Bermuda, which opened in 2005. Put into that perspective, therefore, we here at the Complaints Commission have probably been expecting too much too soon in the way of change. And instead of highlighting our disappointments, as I do in this report, we should perhaps be celebrating more the distance that we've come in so short a time. Let me use this opportunity, though, to remind members of the public that we are all entitled to receive good service from our government institutions. We should expect proper service. We should expect civil servants to be civil, courteous, and helpful. And we should expect the same of other public employees. We should expect reasonable responses within a reasonable time. When we do not receive such service, we should take it up with the head of the agency concerned and follow through. Making a justified, reasonable complaint is not only for personal satisfaction, but it can also be a public service, driving the improvement in service delivery. There are some 52 government departments, and the number of statutory bodies, public authorities, is some 40 and still growing, including the newest public authorities, the Parole Board and the Nonprofit Organizations and Registration Board. They all ought to give you good service. We've taken complaints against bodies such as the Electricity Corporation, the Health Services Authority, the Social Security Board, all the ministries of government, including the Premier's office, and we have even taken a complaint against the Governor's office, in which we found a previous governor at fault in a matter. So the Complaints Commission is open to genuine complaints against anybody who's within our jurisdiction. So please, we are again appealing to people out there to expect and ask for good service. Ask for the service charters of the department that you're dealing with if you don't see those service charters, and they should be right out front for you to pick up. And read them and hold them to the standards in those service charters. And make notes. On our website, we have put a guide to effective complaining, to getting good service and what to do if you don't get good service. Let me conclude by thanking the Governor and the Deputy Governor for their support over the years, and to thank those public officers who respond, generally return our telephone calls, and generally do their jobs well. They know who they are. I would like to thank my hard-working staff. I would like to thank again you, ladies and gentlemen of the information media, for the vital role that you play. But most of all, I'd like to thank all of those persons who took the time and the trouble to use our office. I know that the majority of persons who have grievances, some of them very serious grievances, do not complain. They do not complain elsewhere. They do not complain to us for various reasons. But one reason is just the word I just recently mentioned, time. The time it takes to complain. And I know that I myself, over the years, as I think back, have at times had bad experiences with airlines, for example. And at the time I resolved that when I get back I was going to write a letter to the president of the airline to complain. But in the event I never did take the time to do it, although I know some of my friends who have and who have gotten good responses. So to all those persons who took that time, I would like to say through this forum, thanks to them. As we are preparing here the Complaints Commission for what could well be the first changing of the guard early next year, I do hope that everyone in the territory will get on board with seeking the goal of continuously improving more responsive, more professional public services that are fair to the user, the member of the public. I thank you. And now, as usual, let me see, do you have any questions for the answers that I have?
Sure. Good morning, Complaints Commissioner George. This is Sean Rose, JTV News. You mentioned departments, public service departments such as the BVI-HSA, BVI-EC, the Governor's Office, and the Premier's Office as being some of the agencies that you have had to investigate. What appears to be a common theme, if any, in the complaints lodged by members of the public at your office, not only in relation to these agencies mentioned, but across the board? What seems to be a common theme, a common thread running through most of the complaints?
Thank you for that question, and it's very much like a question we've had in these sessions before, and I think that the answer remains the same, that the most common theme is lack of response. Lack of response to questions that are asked, lack of response to requests that are made, applications that are made, and or again, long delays in getting those responses. That's the most prevalent theme. In our findings, in our investigations against a number of these bodies, we also have found a very common failing on the part of government agencies in keeping proper records of their transactions with members of the public. And that is a question of accountability, because without a proper record and a proper trail to follow, it's often hard to establish what actually happened to an individual or a group that gave rise to the complaint. And so we have been repeating this over and over, that government agencies need to keep proper records of their dealings with members of the public, especially where these have, important consequences to those members of the public.
Just a follow-up. Have you identified, or can you say whether or not a lack of institutional capacity may have contributed to some of those lapses in terms of record keeping and so forth? Maybe they don't have enough people working in those departments.
I would have to agree with that in a number of cases that the resources of the departments and so on concerned are rather stretched. But even taking that into account, if if enough importance was assigned to this task, I think in most cases it could be very much better than it is. But there's no question that as we investigate, we often find that a unit or a department or an agency is so stretched trying to fulfill its role and its mandate that certain things fall by the wayside, which result in what we call maladministration. And in those cases, we would point that out in our recommendations and recommend strengthening of the agency.
Ron Henry with Virgin Islands News Online. You just responded to an earlier question and cited long delays and perhaps some inaction as part of the theme, the general theme to how the Complaints Commission has been operating. You mentioned earlier that more attention is being paid to the handling of complaints on the government's part. Could you give us what indications you might have seen of this and perhaps how you have been able to measure this over instances in the past, perhaps?
Yes. Well, we have here, the Complaints Commission, been referring more complaints back to the government agencies that concern them and have been following up as to how those complaints are handled. Because the Complaints Commission is really a sort of last resort for persons that have complaints. And so when persons bring to us complaints about something that happened to them, but they have not brought it to the attention of the head of the department or the ministry concerned or the chairman or the managing director in case of an authority, we would refer those complaints to them. And it's our experience that they now understand this, and they now understand, and they are now, the agencies, when they get an official referral from us, are now following up more diligently in dealing with the person's complaint, because we don't just refer it, we keep in touch, we monitor it, and we are always here for the person to come back to. So, I don't have any figures to give you, but we've seen some improvement in that respect. Agencies like the police force, for example, have, you can see the improvement there. They have assigned an inspector to receive complaints. So we can now confidently, when we get a complaint against the police, if it has not gone to that person, we can now confidently refer it to the inspector and expect that action will be taken. As I said, my information is that the government, within the government side of things, they have launched, I don't think there's been a lot of publicity about it, but an internal investigation system, which means that each department in the government now has a procedure to deal with complaints. They have an officer designated, a fairly senior officer designated to receive complaints. They've had some training as to how to do it. And this has just recently, very recently, come on stream, and it is much too early for us to judge how it's going to work. We expect, in the next few months, in a year's time, we'll be able to assess how that is working across the board. But those are hopeful signs, because prior to that, you did not have that system in place where there was a particular officer who would pay attention to this matter of dealing with complaints. The service charters of all the agencies did say you can complain, but they didn't seem to have a machinery as they do now. But it's too early to see if, how it's going to work.
You mentioned the relative youthfulness of the Complaints Commission, and you also expressed that at points you might have been impatient at the slow pace of change. Do you think that there's a point that you can be legitimately expected to become impatient?
A point at which you can legitimately expect to become impatient? I would say so, but that's a subjective matter. I was quoting the situation with Bermuda, where their office is just, 8 years old. And here you have the Chief Justice observing, as an outside observer, well, this is a very new thing. This is just a little suckling infant. And so it's no surprise that there's a lot of resistance within the public service culture and the political culture to the intrusion of this little infant into their affairs. It will take time to become accustomed to it. So that time, I won't be around, but I would say, you'd have to give it a good 10, 15 years to maybe before it's embedded to the extent that it is producing consistently high results.
Good morning, Beverly Lewis from ZBVI Radio. Mr. Georges, you have expressed your displeasure about the non-functioning of the Labor Dispute Tribunal, and only yesterday the Labor Minister announced that the tribunal is still not functioning. However, they're seeking assistance from the ILO in that regard. What's your response to that?
Well, my response is, first of all, that I was very happy to see a Minister of Labor making a statement to the House of Assembly and therefore to the people, through that to the people, about the Labor Tribunal. I was just astonished that since 2010, no one in the House has even asked a Minister of Labor what is happening about this tribunal. And there wasn't a question yet, but the minister himself volunteered to come to the House to make that statement. So just the fact of the statement being made to the House, I think, is progress, although it has come very late in the day. The other good thing is that the ministry is working on getting the tribunal in place, and they want to do it properly. And the other very good thing about the statement is that the minister apologized to the public, and particularly to the number of employees or employers who have matters that were unsettled and that the tribunal should have dealt with, and it isn't there still. So those are the positive aspects. It clearly is disappointing that we are still uncertain as to when the tribunal will be operational. And we are all hoping that the measures that the minister has announced and the assistance that he's getting, that within very few months, one hopes that there'll be an operational tribunal.
You spoke about the changing of the guard next year. Are you leaving the commission?
Well, if you've been following what's going on, this position has been advertised now for a few weeks. Yes, my contract comes to an end in February next year.
Complaints Commissioner, what has been the feedback to your call for input from the community about following up on the noise regulation and control in the territory?
There has not been a great deal of feedback so far. We have had one person of whom I'm aware who called in to relate at length their experiences about the noise and disturbance in their homes where they've lived for many, many years, and calling the police and how that has gone. So far as I know, that's been the only one as a result of the call for the sharing of experiences. Now, there again, we know of, and anecdotally, we know of a lot of people, because even that caller was able to tell me the names of other persons who live in the area and who have complained about the same things that she was complaining about. People haven't called in, but we know that it is a real problem.
So what then would be the next step, seeing that you haven't had any, sufficient tangible responses?
Well, the investigation didn't depend on those kind of responses or reactions. We had enough indications that it was an important matter, that a large number of persons are affected from time to time from the calls and so on we'd had before, and so the investigation is proceeding anyway. This would be additional evidence and support, but we are proceeding with the investigation.
Closer to home, what has been the experience from your office in terms of the workload here, your staff? Is it a manageable undertaking given the number of people working here, and how efficient or non-efficient has it been?
Well, we have indicated in all our reports, annual reports certainly, that we are stretched, that we have been asking for a fourth member of staff, and so far we have not been successful in getting that funded. And that fourth member of staff would be a qualified lawyer, because we see the need for that skill, that knowledge in the office. We have not been taken to court yet, but we don't know when that might happen. But and insofar as dealing with the complaints that are coming in, the vast majority of the approaches we have to the office, let me say, do not result in complaints that we investigate, because a large number outside our jurisdiction, a large number of persons that come are just, as they say, looking for advice. So it doesn't show up in our statistics as a complaint, or they are in the wrong place. We have persons who have complaints against the private sector. So the three of us can handle most of the regular complaints that come in on a daily basis. And although it is a stretch, especially as you also, like in any office, as you know, you have to spend a lot of time just doing the things to make sure the office is running and keeps going, as well as the fact that persons get sick, persons are on leave, so we're stretched most of the time. But where I think that we find the lack of staff, and the lack of at least another member of staff, to be a real constraint is in doing what we call on-motion investigations. I see the need, and I think any complaints commissioner would see the need for investigation of various matters of public concern, not just to respond to complaints, but we've been very constrained in doing any of those investigations or launching them or because of the shortage of staff. So if the office is more adequately staffed, I think that one result would be we'd get more own motion investigations, and that I think would increase the production of the office, and make it more effective as a champion of good governance and good service. While it occurs to me, let me say that I'd also like to welcome what I saw in the recent speech from the throne, which is that in this session of the House of Assembly, the Freedom of Information Act will be brought. The statement in this speech from the throne is a lot more extensive than in previous ones, so that gives one the hope that it is going to happen. As we know, that draft has been around for many, many years. And also the Human Rights Commission, which will be a commission, like this is the Complaints Commission, which will be a commission that will deal with complaints, is promised to be brought to the House. So these would be, if these were to happen, then it'll go all the way to expanding, if you like, the internal government watchdog systems, and redound to the benefit of the residents of this territory. So I would like to say that I'm happy to see, as well as there was a promise in the speech from the throne that the Legal Professions Act bill would be brought back. And in my report, I did mention how regrettable it was that that bill, which has been around for many years, still did not make it through the House in this last session. And our interest in it is the provision within it for members of the public to complain where they feel that they have been very badly served by their lawyers. And we've had to turn down persons who complain. We can't take complaints against lawyers, against private individuals. So that would be another, I think, good thing for the members of the public of this territory. If there are no more questions, I would like to again thank you for coming and to look forward to our partnership growing and continuing. Thank you very much. Good day.